Do you know what separates a failed business exit from a highly profitable one? Do you want to maximize the value of your business? The Business Exit Stories podcast is the solution. Through a collection of stories told by the business intermediaries who facilitate those transactions, you'll receive the key takeaways from successful and, yes, some not so successful business exits. Now is the time to begin to position your business for an exit by implementing key strategies designed to maximize your enterprise value and help you achieve an exceptionally profitable exit.
Today we have two guests with us, a father and a son team, Lloyd and Champ Rawls. They are in the succession planning business and run a company called the Rawls Group. They work with privately held, family-owned businesses that are seeking to pass their business on to the next generation. True to form, Champ and Lloyd are partners in a family-run business with their own succession plan in place. You might say they eat what they cook. They share several fascinating stories of family businesses and their succession plans, and in some cases, a lack of one. Our first story is one where a family operation with 3 kids never had a disagreement while mom was around. She was the matriarch of the family. As long as she was there, no disagreements. However, when she unexpectedly passed away, the kids spent the next 10 years and $5 million in legal fees trying to sort out their differences. Pay particularly close attention to the key takeaway in this story. It isn't what you would expect. Then Champ shares a story of a rag-to-riches saga where a family-run business, again with 3 kids, was devastated when the US government facilitated the confiscation of their business. Yes, that's right. They took away their business. See how the outcomes between these 2 families, each with 3 kids, was so different, and, more importantly, the reason why. Then learn how sometimes succession planning is just not possible because of the personalities that exist within the family. And in this case, how a sociopath can create a literal wall to getting any succession planning done. However, there is a silver lining to this story. Listen how this story unfolds. It may or not surprise you, so you'll just have to listen to the episode to decide for yourself. Finally, learn why 50-50 partnerships are not so nifty, and how to avoid a deadlocked decision-making situation that can destroy a business. Anyone in a partnership needs to listen to this story and understand the takeaways here. This is Marvin L. Storm with the Business Exit Stories podcast. Today we have kind of a delightful treat for everyone that's listening in today. We have a father-son team here that is with Rawls and Company. So, Champ, would you take a few minutes and introduce yourself and your company and where you're located?
It's a very good question. I think 2 reasons. Number one, if I'm a captain now, I was a sergeant in succession planning 30 years ago. And I would say that I did not know then that the mandate was that I had to know the true feelings of the recipients before I could really put together a good plan. I made some assumptions with regard to the feelings of the recipients, that is the beneficiaries. I did not drill down and I did not hammer them to tell me how they really felt about one another and how they felt about their mother. And as a result of that, there was a lack of honesty. There was a lack of expression among the family that they were not going to express themselves as long as their mother was alive. Ranchers have a great deal of pride. I'm sure you're aware of that. They do not want their good to be spoken evil of. And they just would suffer themselves rather than put any bad name that the X and X family is quarreling. I mean, that would be a curse. So they didn't do that. They just waited till Lloyd got to his office and they all came in and said, all right, man, we're here and the fight is on. And it went on for 10 years. The legal bills exceeded $5 million. They were fighting over whether the house was in probate court or federal court and who was going to get it, who was going to control it. And after 10 years, I think they finally concluded what I would have suggested at the table had I been able to get them at the table, which, hey, you own it together, put it in an LLC, own it 2 out of 3 votes, and that controls it. But no, they wanted to fight it out. And as a result, this family, which I thought could have a good 4th of July barbecue, they never met again for 4th of July. Forget Thanksgiving, and Christmas cards were out too. That was a fractured family.
Well,
What's the takeaway?
I sort of coming from the ranching, I sort of understand that mentality, both ways, that they're very close when they're close, and when they're not, they're not.
Yeah, if you're a friend, you're a friend, and if you're an enemy.
So what would be the big takeaway here, Lloyd?
Effective.
If you could put a one sentence takeaway, what would our audience take away from this transactional story you've shared?
Effective planning cannot take place without honesty of expression of your feelings, because it
honesty of expression
of your feelings,
because
it will affect the planning. And if you put together a plan that's contrary to the feelings, it will fail.
Well, that's okay. So, just to restate that then, honesty of feelings for the family, and that I guess you're really saying that you really need to identify those as soon as you can, or early in the process, so you can deal with the reality of the situation. And in this case, I guess you're saying as long as mom was around, no one shared their feelings.
No one shared their feelings, and they just thought they could power their way through it, and it turned into a hot mess.
Well, Champ, that was a great story from you, Lloyd here. Why don't you share a transactional story of another family that you dealt with and creating some kind of effective plan that also had its challenges?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that we can say about all of ours, with all due respect, is they come with their challenges. And this particular client of ours is in the auto business. They own auto dealerships. And if anybody can remember the Great Recession, they happened to be a General Motors dealer who, when the government took over General Motors, they were one of the...
So for context here, I'm sure everyone realizes this, but, during the Great Recession, the government, lent or invested in General Motors. I can't remember the exact number, but billions of dollars into General Motors to bail it out. It was called the big bailout at the time. And so that's the circumstances you're referring to. And not only in General Motors, but apparently that has some, kind of ricocheting effects through the entire General Motors ecosystem of dealerships. Is that right?
Correct. And other manufacturers did this as well, but this particular family had this dealership for 20 years previous to this. They were a successful dealer, small. They had 3 kids in college at the time, where General Motors essentially just came in and said, nope, you're no longer a dealer.
And that was being really driven because of the government takeover. General Motors was under obligation to do that. Is that right?
Correct. And it was, they essentially bad luck. I mean, they were just one of the roll up that came in and said, we're pulling your dealership. And so and for a car dealer, the new car brands is everything to them. So their 20-year business was just pulled out the rug from them. Their children, 2 of them were in college. 1 was in high school. Their 2 kids had to drop out of college, come back, and essentially do everything they possibly could to try and develop a used car lot to make money for the family.
So what you're saying, the kid dropped out of school to sell used cars to keep the family afloat?
Both. They turned their former General Motors dealership into a used car business just to keep the family finances afloat. And so otherwise you can say that as rock bottom for the family. And so we were engaged about 3 years later after that. They had, during those 3 years, successfully gone to court with General Motors and the government and won their dealership back. And so you can see in a succession planning story, the foundation here, this is a group of people who are fighters, and the entire family came together. It is
So the family consisted of the mother and father. Who founded the company? Was it the dad or the mom?
The mom. It's a female-owned business. It's a great story of one that as I go, you'll see is pretty impressive. But it's 2 sons, a daughter. Let's fast forward 7 years, now down the road. Their dealership was taken away. They successfully went to court to get it back. All 5 family members came together, and we were engaged to really help them develop a family vision, strategic plan to go, where do we as a family want to go from here? And they have grown now to one of the largest and most successful car dealership groups in the country. There are 3 kids who 2 at the time when this occurred had to drop out of college, had no car business experience, are now leading this company. And we are effectively trying to your point of transactions, sell this business to the kids, because the parents have got to a point where at rock bottom, no money, no income coming in to one of the most successful car dealership groups in the country. So I think
when you say dealerships, you're talking about different brands, different franchises, because dealerships are set up as a franchise type of operation, where it's a trademark franchise where they have the different brands. And you're saying they had multiple dealerships. Did they have 2, 3? What? How many dealership brands or dealerships did they have?
They are 8, about to go on to 10. And that, you can say the publics have 100 and everything. As a private organization, that's a fairly large group. Furthermore, it's not really about the size of them in the sense, it's about the productivity for this group. And they happen to be 8 of the most productive individual dealerships in the country. And I'll go back to led by the 3 kids. And I think the most amazing thing in their story is the family all came together and all decided that, unlike the previous story that we were talking about, we're going to have a shared vision of excellence and growth. And they put a plan together and they went after it. And they're going to have 20 soon. They're going to have 40 soon. They've got goals to continue to grow. So I think it's exciting when you see the opposite and you're involved in being able to, none of the decisions were ours that we made. We were able to help them understand their options. But I think it gets to the point where, as you're saying, transaction wise, we're trying to do as much succession planning, because if you can imagine, there's a lot of value in 10 car dealerships. So moving the value of these down is our biggest goal now, and helping them continue to grow.
Marvin, if I could add, this story contrasts from the story I offered, that family can be, on one hand, a tremendous asset to your business.
So you're talking about the actual family dynamics and how the family functions or does not function as a family.
Right. Well, what Champ did not share with you was that dealership was out in the middle of a cornfield in mid-America. That was not a major metropolitan area. This family just came together. They brought the synergy, they brought the unity, they brought the passion, they put it together. On the other hand, the story I gave, the family tore it apart. The family on one hand, the family on the other hand, it just depends on which hand you play.
And they both had 3 kids.
Absolutely.
They both had 3 kids, and one adversity actually served as a catalyst for them to become more unified than they ever had before. And they all had a common vision, is from what Champ is talking about, I guess they had this common vision. And when they were at the bottom of the barrel, they had lost everything. The government comes in and takes your dealership away. You have no source of revenue, no money. And that served as a catalyst versus something that broke the family. And that would be, as you referred to it, Lloyd, the asset.
Yes, absolutely.
And in your story, the family dynamics was not an asset, but a liability.
Right. Right.
That's a very interesting contrast of dynamics between families, and especially in succession planning. So those out there in the audience that are family operations have, brothers or siblings or cousins or, father-son relationships, daughter-mom relationships, things of that nature. Something to consider that are your family dynamics an asset or a liability when you are looking to exit a business and plan either for succession of keeping it family owned or having those situations, create the necessity to exit to a third party. All right, let's go back to you, Lloyd. Let's talk a little bit about a transaction that didn't have as many challenges, or they all have challenges, but didn't have as many challenges and maybe had a really good outcome.
Thanks, Marvin. I would only add to what you had previously said that the family business oxymoron. You cannot run a family like a business, and you cannot run a business like a family. So what are you to do? The result is that what you have to do is pursue what we call family business equilibrium. And that is understanding your vulnerabilities as a family, understanding your vulnerabilities as a business. As to another story, we were working with a beer wholesaler family that I had a wonderful relationship with the patriarch, and he and I worked together going back into the mid-90s for probably 10 years. And
tell us a little bit more about the type of business.
Well, it was a beer wholesaler with several outlying distributorships. They were a wholesaler for a major brewery. And this business had been in the family for 15, 20 years prior to my entry, and they were quite successful. They were they were very fundamental and very foundational in the beer wholesaling community and what I'd call the emergence of beer as the sport drink. If you're going to go to a sporting event, whether it be NASCAR, football, or whatever, you're going to drink beer. And this family was heavy in promoting that, and they prospered mightily from it. And I worked with this gentleman for about 10 years, and we did all the dive into his finances, the dive into his business, the dive into the structure of his estate and whatever, and everything went well except the family. He had a sociopathic son-in-law that basically he was an impediment, he was a wall to what we were trying to do, which was create
just for context here, when you say sociopath, son-in-law, talk a little bit more about that. I'm trying to visualize what that looks like.
With him, what's in it for me? Anything that would motivate him to take action, it had to be for his benefit. He did not think in terms of family benefit. He did not share in the concept that as a team member, you've got to be able to subordinate, you've got to be able to sacrifice for a greater cause. It was all about him. And
so he would be deceitful and lie and do whatever it was necessary to benefit him.
His sociopathic side, he didn't care who he hurt for the achievement of his personal gain. And he just didn't care who he stepped on. And it was a very unfortunate situation that broke the heart of our client and his wife, because they had three lovely grandchildren of my client. His other children had children, but every grandparent loves every grandchild. And this sociopathic son-in-law was using those grandchildren as leverage to accomplish his goals. And I kept advising the client that he had to make some tough decisions.
Leveraging it by saying you're not going to see him type of thing?
If I'm not a vice president, if I don't get a pay raise, you're not going to see my grandchildren. I'm going to move to Dallas. I'm going to move to New York, and you're not going to have access to them. Well, that wasn't a real tough decision for a grandparent. I mean, what have I got to do to placate this guy? And at which point I said to the client, I said, listen, what I've done for you in organizing your business, structuring your business, shifting some wealth, developing estate plans, developing the documentation, what I've done for you is good. I can't do any more there. But this son-in-law is an impediment. And I don't expect you to throw him out. I just think I need to leave because I'm creating a problem with the family, continuing to bring up that this guy's the problem. And we agreed that I'd step aside, I'd step out. And I did.
So you could see what the ending of the story was going to be like, and you did as much as you could. And, I guess for keeping peace on the homestead, you kind of stepped away and exited being their succession planner. You just wished them the best and stepped away, right?
Well, our goal was to have a significant positive impact. I was no longer a positive impact. I had done all I could, and actually I was creating a negative impact because I was calling a spade, and my client was not willing to acknowledge that. His grandchildren were more important to him than succession. And I said, that's the right decision. There's no business gain worth a family price. Let me step aside, and I think this is going to resolve itself. Just continue to think about it, continue to deal with it. And he called once in a while, we would talk. We were very friendly, great guy. And then unfortunately, he died. And I was so grieved to hear it because nobody had a bigger heart for his business than him. Nobody had a bigger heart for his family. And I knew that he had left a mess because of that son-in-law. And about 2 years later, I get a call from his daughter, who was married to this sociopath. And she says, Lloyd, this was 2011. She says, Lloyd, we need you to come back. And I said, dear, I'd love to come back. You don't know how much I'd love to be working for you. But in lieu of a fist fight in the boardroom with your husband, I really cannot help your family because he is an impediment. And she said the magic words. She says, he's no longer a factor. We've had a divorce. And I said, when's your next meeting? So we re-engaged. And it was, the circumstances were that they were working with their mother to do the transitioning from her estate to her and her two brothers. And I was called into that, and her accountants and attorneys had developed a technically correct plan, which involved $15 million of life insurance, and they were going to pay the estate tax and they would inherit everything. And we came in and said, listen, we don't have to wait for your mother to die. We can set up a program now, and we will sell these businesses to an intentionally defective trust, which is a bunch of technical jargon here. But the reality is we set in place a plan in 2012 to where we can make it happen now. So we shifted the business, had some very tax efficient notes, and moving forward, here we are in 2021, they own the business now. The wife, the surviving widow, a wife who divorced her husband, her two brothers, they own all the business. Mom has a totally liquid estate. She's canceled her $15 million worth of life insurance. And we're happily ever after. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, Marvin, sometimes you run into impediments that are actually walls. I mean, you cannot move your succession plan because there's some family issue that is bigger than any business issue you're trying to accomplish. And at that point in time, you just got to step back sometime. Take a deep breath, continue to think about it, stay engaged, and eventually, as circumstances evolve, a resolution will come. Now, this is a pretty stark resolution that she divorced this guy, but it's not uncommon of what we see that when you stay engaged, a resolution will evolve.
So to summarize your takeaway, which I think is really insightful, is that succession planning sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you just really can't pound a round peg in a square hole. You can go so far, and that is as far as you can go. And what you just said is that if you step back, as you said, take a deep breath, eventually, if you stay engaged, solutions or resolutions will present themselves or evolve. And that probably, as you're saying, more often than not, that's what will happen.
Well,
okay, well, this is great. Champ, let's move over to you, and why don't you talk about a transaction you've been involved in that kind of rolled out and had a really positive impact on the clients you've been working with here.
Well, I think one of the famous articles that Lloyd has written is called 50-50 is not so nifty. And we actually
I want to repeat that there. That's a very catchy soundbite there. 50-50 is not always iffy.
Nifty.
Nifty. Yes. And the clients that we're talking about actually read that article and contacted us. So there is context behind this that from our perspective, one of the biggest challenges in succession planning are 50-50 partnerships. One of the further challenges that we see in succession planning is the concept that siblings generally will give each other the benefit of the doubt. But obviously, if you got two 50-50 partners, in this case, brothers, who have their own kids, siblings will not give each other the benefit of the doubt. They're not siblings, cousins will generally not give each other the benefit of the doubt. And so this particular situation was a company that owned hundreds of franchise restaurants across the country. Two brothers came to own it exactly 50-50. There was no, not one that controlled it more than the other. And they had three children, two with one of the brothers, one with the other, who were both involved in the business. And
notably, this case had no deadlock break. So they could come up on a major decision. And if one of the brothers did not agree, they just could not do it.
And yeah, so 50-50, we were engaged after reading this article to come in and assist them in creating this deadlock break, assist them in seeing any future of the business through their kids who did not share the same values and culture. They just grew up totally different. One was the Northeast, one was the Southeast. And so you push kids into
that's kind of an interesting dynamic. I think that's often overlooked is, in family businesses, different families are raised differently because of the personalities of the spouses that are brought into the family, and just the personality of one of the kids and how they view the world and how they raise their kids. And so you can have, it's true in my family, I have 5 kids, and, each of those children raise their kids entirely different. They're having an entirely different experience and view the world differently. And what you're saying in the business context, that can be a challenge.
It can be and in this case, it was a huge challenge. And I think, and that goes back to, the reason that we were brought in. How do we help these brothers find a future together, which we spent many years with them, month after month, negotiating and helping and developing plans, to the point where we eventually severely hindered the relationship with one of them, which would go on to...
So you're saying your relationship, because of the position you were taking with one of the brothers and the family, they perceived you, having a certain orientation, or maybe favoring somebody over somebody else.
Yeah, it was not so much favoring. It was more so you can call it favoring, but we do, in our opinion, a very good job. And I would say he was not upset we were favoring one side over the other. It was we were being more harsh in the negotiations to get the agreement done, and he did not appreciate our take. So
kind of your style, more of your
yes.
stylistic and how you approach things.
Yes, and so
he was somewhat offended, I guess.
Yes, there you go. And that
he was a sensitive artist.
Yes,
and we were involved in some very and what he created was some very grindy negotiations. And as an artist, he also was not offering critical services to the company. He basically was writing the company, and he recognized his vulnerability, and he took issue with us because everything we were doing was trying to perpetuate the company, and he was thinking of how to perpetuate the very, very good situation he had writing the goodwill of the company.
And eventually we accomplished both of their goals, which they had hired us to do, to come to an agreement with them. But the offense continued on with his side of the family. And what we were tasked to do was really build a relationship between the three cousins and help them.
So this is really the second generation then.
Second generation. So we spent a great deal of time beyond that working with them and understanding that, the success of this long term is no longer with the two brothers. It's going to be with the partnership of the cousins. And we worked very hard, I think, to the story that was just told. Eventually, the side that felt offended, the brother passed away, and the widow eventually terminated our involvement in their succession planning. But I would say, to the story that was just told, I think it'll be a very similar response, that if you stay engaged, you get beyond an impediment, and you have a complex situation such as them, that us or another advisor or somebody will come back into their life that will be able to provide the honesty, the hopefully pathway to succession where these cousins will find their path. But I'm confident what we did for them has put them on a path to the future with an agreement that gets beyond, as I said at the beginning, 50-50 is not so nifty. So if anybody remembers that one, that is a challenge.
So the real takeaway there then is that 50-50 is not so nifty.
Yep.
And, if it works, I guess, if you're 50-50, when there's a common vision and you give each other the benefit of the doubt, but when you don't have that common vision and it's 50-50, it can be a real nightmare.
It can be.
Because you're deadlocked, especially when you say there's no tiebreaker, No.
Correct.
Well, Marvin, specifically, I think 50-50 can work between siblings who give each other the benefit of the doubt. It will not work among cousins who will stick it in and break it off. Cousins
and that's
are,
kind of what happened in the second generation here, is what you're saying.
Well, and the good news that we did was we did put in the agreement, and that agreement is there for those cousins. There is a deadlock break now. They will not have a situation of 50-50, not so. Those cousins, now, when they look back on it, they don't like us for having implemented it, because now they've realized that they've lost the leverage of protecting their ride-along situation. But 50-50 is nifty now, because there is a deadlock break, and that company will not be held up because a nickel is holding up a dime.
You got some good sayings there, some good sound bites. A nickel will not hold up a dime.
That's 48 years.
48 years. So you've experienced this firsthand, huh, champ?
Yes.
Let me tell you, I think this is great. I think that what I'm taking away from this discussion here today is really that, succession planning for, families and businesses that really do want to pass it on to the next generation and have that desire. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish this, but it isn't going to happen magically. If you don't do the succession planning, you have to be able to look out for the interests of the family. And it doesn't happen just because you have a dream that it's going to happen. It really takes some real expertise, and especially with the larger the business entity is. The other thing that I think I'm taking away from this is this whole concept that both of you mentioned, that if a family comes together, anything is possible. And if they don't, virtually nothing is possible. And I think for our audience out there that are family-run businesses that are looking for, succession into another generation, we've had some episodes here where we're talking 5 and 6 generation businesses that have been passed along. And it's really heartbreaking to see that the 6th generation has just no interest at that point. They were raised not entrepreneurially. They went and got great educations, and they're professionals, and they're doctors and lawyers and college professors, what have you, and they just don't have a feel or an interest in the business. So you get to that point. But where there is this desire, I think what we've heard here today, there are people out there that have a specific competency and ability to deal with all the multitude of personal issues and things that are necessary in developing a good succession plan. Well, this has been a delightful conversation, a little bit different than what we normally have on our podcast here. So I'm grateful for both you, Lloyd and Champ, to take the few minutes to share some of your background and decades of experience with our audience here. Champ, why don't you just share how people, if they want to chat with you, have some specific questions on exit planning, how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, they can reach us at seekingsuccession.com, or the more simple way to do it.
So why don't you repeat that again?
It is seekingsuccession.com. Okay. Or the simpler one would just be Google the rawlsgroup.com. And that is our website. Or if they want to reach out to me, my email address is very simple. It is my first name, Champ. So that is CHAMP at Rawls, RAWLS group.com.
Okay. Well, for those of you who want to reach out and get a hold of them, that's the contact information. So this is Marvin L. Storm with Business Exit Stories podcast. So we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Business Exit Stories podcast. For more information or to reach out to today's guest, visit www.businessexitstories.com for more details. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast from your favorite podcasting platforms. And remember, maximizing business value at the time of exit doesn't happen magically. It takes planning.